welcome. This is the, hopefully you're in the right place. It's Mindfulness for Mental Health. And our speaker today is Leanne Calkins. She has an extensive amount of experience in providing evidence-based treatment to adult patients and their caregivers, as well as in the community that's affected by a cancer diagnosis. So I'm going to turn it over to her. And please, afterwards, feel free to ask questions. I may not be here to direct that part because I have to lead the walk, so might have to leave a couple minutes early. But she's here. Ask her good questions. That's what she's here for. So thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. This is my very first time at IWMF, and it's an absolute honor to be here and to get to know more about the important work the foundation does. So we are going to go ahead and get started, and this is just a disclaimer that my job requires me to do. It's just letting you know I'm not giving medical advice today. We're just, we're talking in general about some education and hopefully learn some new skills about how to improve well-being in the context of living with cancer. So the agenda for today is we're going to kind of on the journey to mindfulness talk a little bit about the background of it. So we're going to start with identifying some stress, talking about what is stress. We're going into chronic stress, the nervous system, and then we'll jump into mindfulness and why it's important. We're also going to have a bit of an experiential exercise here. I always try to make things as interactive as possible. So I will be passing around a basket I have filled with different types of shells. I encourage everybody to take one that kind of speaks to you or you find interesting, and we'll use that for that portion of the presentation. Then we're going to talk about additional strategies and some resources for you, and then I have a home practice challenge for those of you who may like to participate. So let's begin by talking about stress and the impact of stress. So I'm a huge believer, before we really delve into mindfulness, it's important to really begin and talking about, well, what is stress? We use mindfulness as a way to counteract stress, but let's start with a bit of Stress 101. So stress is really any circumstance that our nervous system perceives as a threat. But not all stress is bad. Some stress has been absolutely vital to our survival as a species, and good stress, as a matter of fact, helps us perform and advance. It creates opportunities for us to learn new things and to experience new things. And so, first of all, I just like to let's just get rid of the concept that stress is bad and we have to get rid of it. Absolutely not. Think about stress like the ocean. Depending upon what you're doing and what you're hoping to get out of the ocean that day, you may be wanting different types of water, right? If you have a 2-year-old with you, if you are in the mood just for some gentle wading, you want pretty calm waters. You're going to enjoy that. And then sometimes you're in the mood for, okay, well, we want to bounce out in the waves and have a little bit of fun. And so then you might be looking for a little bit of choppy water. And then you might have people who are surfing fanatics, and they might be looking for those big waves and chasing those big waves, okay? So in that context, if waves represent stress, you have people who chase that big stress or who really thrive in that big stress. And so that's why I say, stress is really about how our nervous system perceives it and what's actually going on. So just a little bit of a framework as we get started here. So stress has had a purpose. This is an absolutely vital response to danger. And sometimes I get patients who come to me and they say, oh, Leanne, I'm coming to you because I'm so stressed out and I don't want any stress. I just don't want to experience stress anymore. And I'm like, well, that actually would tell me something's wrong. If you weren't experiencing stress, I'd be really, really worried, because stress helps you respond to something in the moment. If you are driving and somebody's swerving in front of you, you need your body to initiate that stress response so that you can swerve out of the way or put on the brakes or beep and honk and move. So if you weren't stressed in that situation, that would actually be a real threat to your survival. So just like with this shark, there are some things we want to scare us, and there are good reasons why they scare us. Stress definitely does stuff to our body, and that is why it's so unpleasant most of the time. So you have that heart rate increase, the bladder can relax because your body's trying to get rid of stuff that's not important. So sometimes you may feel like you have to pee if you get really stressed. You may get tunnel vision or even dilated pupils. You might notice you start to shake a little bit. You might get flushing in your face, a dry mouth, digestion slows, because on the list of basic needs, being able to digest food, your body kind of puts that at the bottom of needing to run away or flee something. And then finally, hearing loss. And I can't tell you how many times people say to me, the moment I got the news or the moment I heard this really terrible thing, I didn't hear anything after that. That's what I mean by hearing loss. It's what your body kind of attunes to. You're just more inwardly focused at that point. You might hear your blood rushing through your veins, you might hear your heart pumping, but what's going on around you may just feel like noise. So these physical reactions are important to help our bodies cope short term with the needs we have when we're getting stressed. And they help our body respond to everything. So that's why even though stress feels like a body thing, it's actually a brain thing too. And it's a brain thing because whenever something physical happens in the body, we have this corresponding behavioral change or emotional thing happening in the body. And if we think about mindfulness as the connection between the mind and body, this can help explain why, just like a stress response is a connection between the mind and body, we need to have a relaxation response that's also connected to the mind and body. So along with some of the physical changes that come with stress's impact on the nervous system, like decreased short-term memory, that's not important for you, the very short-term stuff. When people often find it hard, they might have to reread things multiple times, or they may forget what they were told and need somebody else to tell them. Increased breathing and heart rate, decreased libido. Sex, while wonderful, is not something you need in a survival situation, and so your body kind of flips off that switch. You may notice changes to the immune system, and some skin rashes like hives can come up. So whenever you have those physical changes, then you got some behavioral changes. You may notice kind of the up and down with the mood, changes in eating, too much, too little, changes in sleep. Sometimes people self-medicate with alcohol or other substances, nervous habits like tics, nail biting. Sometimes people find everything overwhelming, so they find it beneficial to isolate. Pull the covers up over their head as a way to kind of hunker down and try to manage how they're feeling. And then there are the resulting kind of relationship impacts. So stress is definitely a full body experience. This is what our body does every day when it encounters stress. So just to normalize this process, at the top we have our neutral state. This is what ideally we're all living our lives in this neutral state. And then the nervous system perceives something. It decides on a response. Are we going to freeze? Are we going to fight it? Are we going to flee? Or is this actually not the threat we thought it was? And then there's an ending. So that is kind of what our nervous system is doing on a base level every day. None of us are aware of this process. This is all going on automatically. It's kind of like a computer, just, in sleep mode. It does its own thing. We're not really aware of what it's doing, but all these processes are going on. So think about, an email at work that's reminding you of a deadline, or an email that reminds you of something you forgot. You can almost immediately feel that stress cycle begin. Or having to slam on the brakes while driving. This looks very different with cancer. This looks very different even when you're in surveillance, even when you're in post-treatment survivorship, even when you are loving somebody who is living in a body with cancer. That threat is less clear, right? There's not always a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's where it can get really tricky in cancer, where we find people get stuck sometimes because there's no clear middle and an end. And that can lead to something we call chronic stress. So think about those tsunami waves we talked about earlier. So really the waves that are pounding over and over again without even the opportunity to come up for air. And that's what it can feel like when you are living with cancer, when you are living with the unknown and waiting for news or wondering what the future looks like. There can really be this never-ending cycle. And I threw some statistics up there about what we know about chronic stress. And, people in the cancer community aren't the only ones impacted. It's something incredibly common in our society. And this isn't really to scare anybody or to make anybody feel hopeless. This is really just to normalize that this is something, because even though it's something our bodies do, there are things we can actually do to counteract some of these issues that pop up. So it feels like we're out of control and at the mercy of a lot of these emotions and a lot of these feelings. But what we know from research is that in the cancer experience in particular, there are actually some lifestyle changes, very easy switches that can really help restore some of those calming processes, some of those healthier, more balanced processes in the body, which will in turn hopefully help you feel more capable of managing whatever comes your way. We know that stress management is pretty critical for improving well-being in cancer, and you all may have heard this time and time again from your providers, from your family members, from people who are very well-meaning. And yes, it's true, but it is also easier said than done. Cancer treatment in particular, we know that even though it has the power to help manage cancer in the body, it also impacts areas of the brain that are important for emotional regulation. And so when the brain is affected by illness or injury, it spends all its time trying to keep you safe and trying to find threats, and doesn't have a lot of time for everything else. So that's what brings us to mindfulness. Now that we've kind of talked about stress, set the stage for why it's there. It's not your fault it's there. It makes perfect sense it's there. So mindfulness, it is, I love this quote from Jon Kabat-Zinn. He says that it's an awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment without judgment. So it's really an intention, a practice, a skill, and the allowance of the space and time needed to make choices. So mindfulness is really different from relaxation, which can be challenging because relaxation has a particular goal, right? It's to reduce stress, it's to feel better. Mindfulness has a goal only as much as it is to be in the moment. So sometimes being in the moment is not very comfortable. Sometimes being in the moment means holding space with the fact things feel really hard. Sometimes being in the moment means you notice you're experiencing some pain or discomfort. And so that's what can be really challenging about mindfulness compared to something that feels more straightforward like relaxation. So, mindfulness is not. These are some of the biggest things I hear, some biggest misconceptions. It's really not about emptying the mind. You know, I want to go back here to this particular graphic, and you can see how the person's mind is kind of all a jumble of all these different things. And the dog's mind, it's not empty, right? There are things there, but everything's ordered, everything's neat, everything feels less cluttered. And that's really a better depiction of mindfulness than a clearing of the mind. Mindfulness is not denying suffering or being toxic, having some toxic positivity. It's not saying, oh, everything's fine, there's no reason to worry, everything happens for a reason. Some of those things that feel really challenging, that's not mindfulness. Mindfulness is also not only feeling good feelings, which can be really hard for some of the people I work with. When you feel really bad or really crappy a lot of the time, saying, I'd like you to sit with that it didn't feel really good, people are like, nah, I don't want to do that. Yeah, I'm doing that all the time. So there's a little bit, wrapping your head around it. Mindfulness is also not never being sad, and it's also not escaping what's going on. And oftentimes when people tell me while they're sitting with how hard things are, they're not really. They're escaping it, or they're distracting themselves, or they're jumping to the next thing so that they don't have to sit with it. So by focusing on the present moment and being mindful, it can really help us pause and connect with what's important to us. And Stephen Covey quoted it this way. He was inspired by Viktor Frankl. And for those of you who aren't aware of Viktor Frankl, he wrote this wonderful book called The Man's Search for Meaning. And he was a survivor of the Holocaust in one of the concentration camps. And therefore, pretty much an expert on suffering. But basically in that book, what Stephen Covey took away from it was between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is the power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And so the idea of mindfulness is that it creates space between the hard things and how we react to them, so we have more choices. So instead of those immediate, really intense responses we feel arise in us when something happens, we instead might have a moment to pause and to breathe and to consider other options, and therefore retake control. And in an experience like cancer, where it feels like so much control is constantly taken from you, regaining control in even a way like this can feel incredibly empowering. This takes practice. It is not easy, but I always begin by saying you might already be doing mindfulness practices and might not even recognize it. So if you've ever done yoga, if you've ever tried meditation, if you have a prayer practice or attend religious or spiritual services, that's actually a mindfulness experience, a mindfulness practice. It's kind of like a muscle. This is something you do have to do over and over again. It's really hard. Your mind, you don't want to sit with what's going on with you, and your mind does everything possible to try to point you everywhere else. I know when I first sit down and try to be with myself, my mind starts going through its to-do list. That tends to be its primary coping technique. So I kind of have to bring myself back over and over again. So that is completely normal and understandable. But I like to think about mindfulness as, if we go back to the ocean metaphor, think about it like the interval between big waves. So just like when we were talking about chronic stress, and you're in the water and the waves just pound and pound and pound one right after another, and you can't breathe and you're gasping for air and you feel like you're going to go under, mindfulness widens the gap between those waves. It doesn't get rid of the waves, it widens the gap. So you have the opportunity to breathe, to wipe the water out of your eyes, and to decide what to do next, how to prepare for the next wave. So that's really what we're talking about here. So we're going to go into our 5-minute grounding. We begin, I'm just going to ask everybody just to get comfortable in their seat. And if you can, try to sit a little bit closer to the edge of your seat just so that your feet make really good contact with the ground. It's completely up to you. You can either close your eyes or you can keep them opened, just not focused on anything in particular, whatever you are most comfortable with. And take your shell or whatever object you have and cup it in your hand. Have your hand in your lap. And I just like to start and begin as you have this sitting in your hand, cupped in your lap. And just begin to notice your breath. And we're not trying to change our breath right now. This is really just checking it out. There's no right or wrong way to breathe. It's nice not having a right or wrong way to be for just a few minutes. And you can notice if the breath is coming from lower in your lungs or high up in your lungs, or if it's deep, if it's shallow. And then move your attention to that object in the palm of your hand. And let's start by just noticing the weight of that object resting against the palm of your hand. Can you barely feel it? Or is there a weight to it that's definitely noticeable, depending upon what you chose? Just notice that. And notice how much space it takes up in the palm of your hand. And then once you've done that, you can begin moving your fingers around the edges of the object and notice the areas that feel smooth or bumpy, or maybe even there's some areas that feel sharp and pointy. What sensations arise for you with those differences of the bumpy, the smooth? Just notice those differences. Is there one that you prefer over the other? Is one more pleasant? Is one less pleasant? And then you can hold that object and begin tracing your fingers all across the surface. Maybe your object is flat, and so you are touching along the top of it. How does that compare to tracing the sides of it? Are there ridges? Is it smooth? And then you can flip it over and feel the bottom of your object. Does that feel different than the top? Does it feel the same? Are there areas of smoothness? Are there areas where smoothness leads to some ridges or to some bumps? And finally, Make a fist, just a gentle fist around that object in your hand. How big is it? How small is it? Are your fingers able to completely encircle your shell or your object? And take a moment to notice just in your body what it was like to focus so completely on one thing for a few minutes. And if you noticed your mind wandering during it, that's okay. Absolutely normal. Minds wander, it's what they do, it's what they're built for. And then you can take one more breath, and when you're ready, come back to the room and open your eyes. I'm curious if anyone would like to share just what that really simple grounding exercise felt like.
I was relaxed.
Okay.
I heard what you were saying, and obviously I kind of knew like a lot, but I wasn't focused on it. I was just kind of off on my own somewhere.
Awesome.
Great noticing.
I felt like I took control over the thoughts rather than let the outside things dictate those thoughts. And you mentioned about the gap between thoughts. I've heard it referred to as you have a responsibility to use your responsibility.
I love that.
I love that. You have a responsibility to use your responsibility. And to anybody who was able to focus on the object, to anybody who noticed that they weren't focusing on the object and instead were focusing on the sound of my voice, were focusing on thoughts in their head. That's one of the great things about mindfulness is there's no wrong way to do it, right? I encourage people to think of it like as an experiment. What is it going to be like today? What am I going to do today?
So, I'm a type A. I definitely went to another place. But I woke up and I still have cancer. And it's still there. I mean,
Yeah.
so I hear what you're saying, and it seems to work in the moment. But when I came to, I'm still in the same place I was when I walked in the room.
Absolutely.
And I'm not trying to be a jerk about it, but
Yeah.
it's why I'm cynical walking in here, because I know my own mental background. It just, I don't know what this does for me, for real. Because look, I have cancer, it gets me down, sometimes we act like I'm just taking a walk.
Yeah.
It hits me.
Absolutely. So one of the things, you're absolutely right, mindfulness does not change the reality of situations. And a lot of people notice that when they are in the moment, when they're doing the grounding, it's one thing and they're able to feel different, right? They're able to feel good. But then when they return to the present, it all hits them again, right? It feels like those waves are coming. So over time, just like mindfulness is a muscle, those periods of calm increase. So the relief you felt doing the exercise extends and widens over time. And so that becomes more common. Your brain becomes more wired to feel that way. So it doesn't feel so hard all the time. And so that's one of the reasons why doing this regularly could change things. And if we trust the research, which of course is about most people, right? There's always some exceptions. What we know from most research with most people living with cancer is it does improve things mentally, physically. But I appreciate your skepticism. I share your skepticism. Thank you for bringing that. And you saying you do things in a different way really resonates with me. So we're going to talk about what this looks like in daily life. So some ways that you can really use mindfulness to change how you're experiencing things in daily life are to do something I like to call child mind. And that's imagine you're doing something for the very first time all over again. So think about how a baby, the first time it goes and it sees something, it is awed by everything. Eyes are wide open. It's fabulous. It could look at it for hours, whereas you've seen it 10 million times before. Think about really harnessing that in some of these things we do every day, like brushing our teeth. What is it actually like to put the toothpaste on our toothbrush and brush our teeth? Or eating chocolate, seeing a flower, not just seeing it, stopping, touching it, smelling it, really experiencing it, or even petting your dog and cat can be a wonderful way to really incorporate mindfulness. Pretend it's the first time you've ever seen a dog or a cat. I mean, imagine the cuteness overload just of seeing that for the very first time all over again. By being childlike, it brings a joy to things that don't feel joyful, that feel routine, that feel like a rut, that feel just like another humdrum thing in a humdrum life. And so bringing mindfulness to it can create moments of joy in situations that otherwise feel depleted of joy. You can also do mini mindful check-ins. What am I feeling? I feel like crap. This is a rough day. Maybe there's an emotion you can name. Maybe there's some sensations. It's a bad pain day for me. It's a bad fatigue day. I'm just feeling like crap. What are you thinking about? Even verbalizing your emotions lessens their power over you. We know this, that just naming an emotion can be incredibly therapeutic. You can decide every time you open the fridge, you're going to do that mini mindful check-in. You're going to check how you're feeling. Every time you pick up a fork, maybe every time you open your car door and sit in your car, that is your time for your mini mindful check-in. What naming our emotions at different times of the day helps us realize is that even though if somebody asks us, well, how are you feeling? Well, I feel sad all the time, or I feel anxious all the time. People actually start to say, well, actually, I was only anxious or sad 2 of the 3 times I did a check-in. The other time I was feeling something different. So those emotions that feel constant, we start to recognize, oh, there is some ebb and flow in them, just like the tides. There's some ebb and flow in how we feel. And knowing that there's an ebb and flow, even when things feel hard and overwhelming, can help it feel a little bit more bearable. So our bodies are absolutely wired for connection of our brain and body. What can this look like? This can look like get out and move. Maybe you're already doing this. Doing some mindful walking, not just walking, but appreciating the surface you're walking on. Is it spongy grass? Is it concrete? Is it tarmac? Is it track at a field? Yoga, Tai Chi, and Qigong are wonderful mindfulness practices. Forest bathing. And what forest bathing means is really just to surround yourself in green space. Now, what green space looks like for each of us is very different, depending upon where we live and depending upon how privileged we are in our communities to have green spaces. But even houseplants, even going to the grocery store and stopping in the flower section, that counts, you guys. Studies have actually shown that even 3 days of being out in nature increases our capacity for creativity by 50%. So that higher order thinking that's involved with creativity, that doesn't happen when our bodies are stressed and under constant chronic stress. So imagine that just by spending 3 days in nature, you could kind of get that higher level brain back online. You could also work on gardening. the pulling of weeds, touching the dirt. That is all mindful activity. Live music, or even listening to music in your house. Music, the rhythms, those are something that our bodies resonate with. That's one of the things why they think we resonate so strongly with the ocean and the sounds of the waves. Our bodies have their own internal rhythms, and music has rhythms, and nature has rhythms, and they actually help regulate our nervous system. And so sometimes you can feel the beat of music in your body. That is extremely regulating. Depending upon where you are in your treatment journey, you may or may not have experienced some changes to appetite or taste, but I've had other patients who really find joy in food. And so their chosen mindfulness technique is to do tasting menus. They'll go to those olive oil stores and we'll try a bunch of different ones and see if they can tell the difference, all those minute differences in flavor, really experiencing those flavors and the textures. You can do this with cheese. You can do this with honey. Your local area might have restaurant weeks where they do special menus, so you can try out some of the restaurants and really make a full body experience out of food. You can also do grounding exercises. I like deep belly breathing, which is, we don't breathe out of our bellies, obviously. We call it belly breathing. It's just breathing out through the lower part of your lungs. So instead of breathing up here in our chest, we breathe down here deep in the lower part of our lungs. And that also is a hack to calm your nervous system, to regulate your nervous system. Touch, just like we did with the seashells or objects, touch brings you back into the here and now. Maybe it's not a seashell. Maybe it is your comfiest clothing or a fidget toy, or maybe it's walking barefoot. Those are all some ideas. Sometimes I tell people wear your comfiest cardigan or have your comfiest blanket, the one that you always like to touch. You can do the 4-3-2-1 technique. This is a really common grounding technique where you just do a countdown and go through all the different senses. And then we'll hit some resources. These are all available in the PowerPoint handout that you have. So obviously, IWMF is really offering wonderful mindfulness practices already. They offer mindfulness meditation that you can tune into. They offer the sound bath, yoga nidra. These are all mindfulness exercises that you can join virtually through their website. The organization I work at is called Inova Peterson Life with Cancer. Even though we're based right outside of Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia, we offer support globally, internationally to anybody. We have a particular set of classes called the Integrative Psychosocial Oncology Program, short name IPOP, which is basically where we teach mindfulness. And so we have an intro class, and each of our 4 classes kind of builds on top of the other. So it offers an opportunity in a structured setting with other people living with cancer or impacted by cancer to really learn different techniques. It's not one size fits all. There's typically 1 or 2 things you find that will work really, really well for you. And so if it'd be helpful for you to find out a bunch of different ones, you can always try that. Our programs are free of charge, so you don't have to worry about cost. You may also consider a program like mindfulness-based cancer recovery, which is offered at various health sites throughout the country. So you can always see if there's one happening near you. Life with Cancer also offers this program. But overall, locally, because each medical center is so specific, depending on funding sources, depending upon locale, everybody's a little bit different. So I encourage you asking your cancer center's oncology social worker, like me, what you're eligible for. They will know exactly what's going on in the community. They will know exactly if there's an MBCR program happening that you're eligible for. They can be a wonderful source of ideas. Hey, this local organization is offering this, you'd be a great candidate. So I always encourage sending an email, giving a call, or asking your OSW. Also, you can consult a local meditation center. They're all over the country in most communities, and beyond meditation itself, they often have mindfulness groups, mindfulness activities that are open to the public. So that can be a great way to learn a little bit more. And then finally, most of you know about some of the mindfulness apps like Calm or Happier. So this is your home practice challenge. And in the infamous words of Sharon Salzberg, who is a wonderful mindfulness teacher, she says, mindfulness isn't difficult. We just need to remember to do it. It's my number one issue with mindfulness too. We are here at this incredible beach. And so my recommendation and challenge for you is that you go to the beach. Go to the beach, but do it mindfully. Sit by the water, close your eyes and listen. What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you feel? What does the sand feel like between your feet and your hands? What's its temperature? Where is the place where the sand turns from dry to wet and cold from the surf? What color is the water? What color is the sand? So that is my challenge for you. Well, I really want to thank you for bearing with our tech issues up here today. And I'm happy to answer any questions, any thoughts that people have. CBTI is wonderful. A lot of the strategies used in mindfulness programs come from those evidence-based researches. And we know that mindfulness in particular helps with fatigue, it helps with sleep. So a lot of the symptomatic things that people experience with cancer, mindfulness can help with those too, not just with mental health and well-being, but with the cancer-related fatigue, with the cancer-related insomnia. There is an intervention called meaning-centered psychotherapy that was created for people living with cancer, and it is entirely based upon his teachings in that book. I highly recommend looking into it if you find his teachings especially powerful, because it really is about the fact that we can't always change our reality, but can even having a choice in how we show up and face that reality, that can give us new purpose and new reason for continuing. So it's definitely, it's challenging. It's a challenging concept, but can be very powerful for some people. But thank you so much for coming, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day.